What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. As always, I'm your host, EJ Holland. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure to do that. It is completely free. If you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine, make sure to sign up right now, $1 for 1 year. I know that promotion has been going on for a long time, but it is coming to an end at some point here in the near future. So if you haven't taken advantage of the $1 deal, you need to take advantage now, because if not, it becomes $100. Also, drop a like. Let's get this video to 500 likes. And like I said, this is a live show. This is something we do every week for you guys to interact with me, to get the latest on Michigan recruiting. So I'm here to answer your questions. Make sure to drop a question in the comment box. Appreciate everybody out there listening, joining in. Like I said, post a comment with your question, and I am here to answer them for the next hour or so. We're also going to hit on some important Michigan targets. It looks like we don't have any questions preloaded right now, so let's go ahead and talk about Nyckoles Harbor. I know that's on everybody's mind right now. Five-star athlete out of Washington, D.C., set to make his official visit to Michigan this weekend. And so Nick obviously didn't do too much with recruiting this summer. He was really consumed with track. If you guys don't know much about Nyckoles Harbor, he is a freak athlete, 6'5", 225 pounds, runs a 10.28 100 meter. He's a guy that aspires to play in the NFL and also run in the Olympics. Like I said, just a freak athlete, the biggest freak athlete I've ever covered in my decade-long career of covering recruiting. But in terms of his recruitment, I know South Carolina had built up some momentum here as of late, and I said, yeah, I do buy the South Carolina momentum. They've done a great job recruiting him, pitching the track program. They got him on campus for an official visit this past weekend. Good news for Michigan is South Carolina got completely blown out. Now, Harbor's not going to make his decision based on one game result, but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction that South Carolina got blown out. Michigan's set to host Maryland, which is his home area school, and is still in the running in his recruitment as well. I think Michigan wins that game by a good margin, and they should be able to impress Harbor on the field. I think where Michigan might be lacking a little bit. The track program has done a great job of recruiting him as well, but the climate is obviously not as friendly as a South Carolina or an LSU, and then also NIL. But at the same time, Harbor's going to be arguably, aside from Arch Manning, the most marketable prospect in this entire class nationally. I mean, to be a guy at his size and have his speed and do what he's doing on the field and on the track, I think the NIL dollars will come no matter where he lands. But I know other schools are making more aggressive NIL pitches at this point in the recruitment. So we'll see how that all kind of shakes out. But I think Michigan's staff has been all in here. Jim Harbaugh has personally been involved. Michigan's tight ends coach Grant Newsome has been in contact quite a bit. Michigan's wide receiver coach and area recruiter Ron Bellamy has been leading the way with Harbor. And so they've done a phenomenal job. The academics is a big piece as well. Harbor's a 4.0 student, and he does take academics seriously. So do his parents. His father works for NASA. His mom works in a hospital. So he is a guy that is looking closely at Michigan's academics. That's definitely an edge that Michigan has over the southern schools like South Carolina and LSU. But this visit will be big for his recruitment. I'm not sure, how soon Harbor decides, though. I think he's going to continue to make official visits. Like I said, he visited South Carolina, now visiting Michigan. He's looking to visit LSU at some point here in the next couple of months. Maryland is also looking to get an official visit. So, again, we'll just kind of see how it shakes out. I think we're here for the long haul with the Nyckoles Harbor recruitment. I do not see him making a decision at any point here in the next month or so. I think this one probably goes into the early signing period and potentially beyond that. Nick told me he is not an early enrollee, and the last time I asked him about signing early, he was not sure. So could even be February. Who knows? With him taking basically the entire summer off of recruiting, he did visit a couple schools here and there, but again, was focused on track. I think now is kind of where he's really starting to get into things. So we have a question here from Shadyville 03 on Nyckoles Harbor. Is Harbor still looking to play exclusively on the offensive side of the ball at the college level? Um, I talked to him last month and he told me that he was still open to playing edge. I think he's a phenomenal pass rusher. I think he's a future top 5 pick or number 1 overall draft pick as an edge guy. But again, he's extremely serious about pursuing his dream of running in the Olympics. And so he'd rather preserve his body and play on the offensive side of the ball as a tight end or as a wide receiver. So that is his preference. I don't think he's, again, closed any doors on positions, but he does want to play on the offensive side of the ball. That's why I mentioned, Ron Bellamy, Grant Newsome being more involved in this recruitment as opposed to Mike Elston. So that's kind of the rundown with Harbor as far as position. But right now he's a little more polished as an edge, as a wide receiver, tight end. He has some things he can work on, particularly route running and just becoming more of a natural pass catcher. But again, when you have his size, when you have those measurables, when you run a 10-2-8 100 meter, I mean, I think you have a chance to be a game changing tight end, or at the very least, a big threat outside. So we'll see where Harbor ends up. I'm really curious to follow his college career. Let's go ahead and shift gears to a different recruit. We're going to go ahead and choose Prince Elias' question, and he asked Jyaire Hill, what's the word? Yeah, thank you for commenting, Prince Elias. So Jyaire Hill is a prospect we've talked a lot about on the Wolverine over the last several days, especially since I was out in Kankakee, Illinois on Friday and had a chance to see him live. Ran into Brett Bielema, Illinois head coach, who was there scouting him. Look, Illinois and Michigan remain at the very top of this recruitment, and it's not often you say recruitment's an Illinois Michigan battle, but this one is. Illinois is right down the road from Hill. They've done a terrific job of recruiting his mother. On top of that, they are making him the number 1 overall priority on the board. When you look at Michigan, yeah, they're making Jyaire the top guy along with Chris Peel on the corner board. For Illinois, he's the guy. They want him to be the face of the class. And obviously there are more opportunities at Illinois for Hill to come in and play right away. At the same time, Michigan offers a lot more in terms of development, NFL production, uh, academics. I mean, there's a lot going for Michigan. It's a superior program on and off the field. And I think Jyaire realized that when I asked him, hey, compare Michigan to Illinois. What does Michigan offer that you like more than Illinois? What does Illinois offer that you like more than Michigan? And so for Michigan, he told me just the program, right? I mean, it's a bigger school. It's the national brand is unmatched. I mean, the global brand is unmatched. There are opportunities to play on the big stage at the big house at Michigan, where Illinois is kind of bottom tier Big Ten program. On the flip side of the coin, he told me the thing he likes about Illinois the most is just the coaching staff. They've really built a personal connection with him. Like I said, they really have made him that number 1 guy on their recruiting board, and so he's definitely feeling that and feeling the opportunity to play right down the road. Not that Michigan's too far away, but more so the opportunity to potentially start as a true freshman, which has been a big pitch from the Illini. In the household, like I said, I think Illinois has done a really good job with his mom. I think Michigan has done a really good job with his dad. So right now it looks like it's a split household. Jyaire was supposed to make a decision this summer, did not make it. Then he set a decision date for September, did not make the decision. This one could go all the way to the early signing period. He's been torn for a long while. Remember, Michigan had the momentum here early, then Illinois built up some momentum in the offseason. Now I think it's anybody's guess on the actual decision, and it's anybody's guess on the actual timeline as well. So um, right now, I think it's still 50-50. I wouldn't lean one way or the other. I wouldn't be surprised if he lands at either school. When you have a divided household and you have a guy that's consistently delaying a decision, then you know that they are legitimately torn about things. So, Michigan's going to continue to recruit him hard. He told me he's looking to come in for the Michigan State game in late October. So Michigan will look to get that momentum back on its side after a strong visit for the barbecue at the Big House this summer. Let's go ahead and go to another question. Haven Harris, our frequent listener here, he says, EJ, I'm seeing a lot of committed prospects visiting other schools this coming weekend. Besides the Notre Dame kids that are being kept quiet, do you think any committed kids could be coming to visit soon? So, for these first few games, obviously the visitors haven't been super high profile. I mean, you had Caden McDonald in, you had Chris Peel in, Nyckoles Harbor's coming in this weekend because it works with his schedule. The thing about Harbor is he plays a lot of Saturday games, so doesn't have many windows of opportunity to make official visits this weekend. He does not play on a Saturday, so that's a big reason why he's going over to Michigan. But Michigan's really going to load up for Penn State and Michigan State in October. I think you'll see a lot of the top targets make their way to those two games. You already have some guys that are scheduled to come in for official visits, uncommitted guys like Spencer Fano, DJ Chester, guys like that. But as far as committed kids, the preference for Michigan has always been to more so keep it quiet until things are fully mapped out. Covering kids that are committed to other schools are always a sensitive situation. For Notre Dame kids, I have no problem saying that I think Charles Jagusaw could make his way to campus. I think Osbury could make his way to campus as well. I think Jalen Brown, who's currently committed to LSU, top 100 wide receiver, could potentially make his way to campus. And I think the more Michigan wins, and the more other programs falter here as we continue to get into the meat of the season, I think there's going to be more opportunities for kids committed not just to Notre Dame but schools nationally to visit for those marquee games. So Penn State's going to be a fun one as the big noon kickoff, and then Michigan State, obviously rumored to be a night game. I think that one will be even more loaded than the Penn State game. So should be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and go down to Shadyville03, who has another question. He says, any visits lined up for the offensive line targets? Yeah, so like I just mentioned, DJ Chester, Spencer Fano coming in next month. Caleb Lemieux also set to come in next month. The visit this weekend is obviously Nathan Afobe, on 300 prospect out of Georgia, interior offensive lineman. Afobe is one of the more interesting recruits nationally this cycle. When you look at his rankings, they are kind of all over the place, I guess. On3 just released its updated rankings. Before yesterday, he was a top 100 prospect. Today, he is a top 150 prospect, number at 128 overall. And then you see the other rankings here. 24/7 has him as a middle of the pack 3-star. ESPN has him as a 3-star. I don't really know how they do their grading systems. I'm not too familiar with what a 78 means on ESPN, but he's rated higher at that position as an interior offensive lineman than 24/7, which again has him as the 87 interior offensive lineman, but a middling 3-star. And then Rivals has him as a middling 3-star as well. So big discrepancy between the On3 ranking and the other three sites rankings. I think the answer when you have those types of, one service has a guy really rated really high, and then other services have him rated really low. I think the answer is always somewhere in the middle. I had a chance to go out to Georgia to see Nathan Afobe. Didn't get to see him move around though. That day they didn't have practice, and I just stopped by his school. But just kind of sizing him up, watching his film, talking to his high school head coach. I think he's a guy that is just fascinating from a rankings perspective. That could be a high 3 star or a low 4 star is probably what I would give him to be conservative. I think he's a boomer bust kid. I think he's extremely athletic on the interior of the offensive line. Great feet, great speed for his size, but he still needs to add some strength to his and weight to his frame. But he's also a guy that's just really raw technically. So that's another, thing that he will need to work on at the next level for a Phobie. It's all about development. And when you look at Michigan, obviously there's, not a lot of places better for development than Michigan, especially when it comes to strength and conditioning. Ben Herbert does a great job running his program. And then Sharon Moore, having played offensive line at the next level, understands what it takes to develop guys, up front. And I think Nathan Afobe really values that. He has a great connection with Sharon Moore. I think Michigan leads going into the visit. Miami is the other school to watch. A lot of people have asked, why haven't you put in a pick for Michigan to land Afobe yet? I guess I'm just a little gun shy this cycle because I know Michigan's not doing some of the NIL things that Miami's done. Now, Michigan was able to beat out Miami for Collins and Chimpong earlier this cycle, but you just never know with schools that are playing the NIL game the way Miami is. So I'm cautious on that. He doesn't have a Miami official visit set, but it could come after Michigan, which makes me even more weary. So we'll see how it all plays out. But right now, I think Michigan has the lead going in. They've made him a priority on the interior offensive line board. He has a connection to the program through David Ajabo, who's a family friend, and he has family that lives in the state of Michigan as well. So I think Michigan's doing a great job there. And then the other offensive lineman coming in, like I mentioned, Caleb Lemieux from Arizona, top 100 prospect. Is the guy that visited for the barbecue at the Big House. DJ Chester on 300 prospect, another interior offensive lineman out of Georgia. Spencer Fano on 300 tackle out of Utah, also coming in for an official visit. All those set to take place in October. And then Nick Fatig, Texas Tech offensive line commit, is still scheduling his official visit, but looking speaking of Haven Harris's comment on committed prospects, he's definitely one to keep an eye on. Wouldn't surprise me if the Red Raiders pledge makes his way to Ann Arbor before the fall ends. Let's go ahead and go to another Shadyville question. I mean, he's just firing these away. But how did the Chris Peel visit go? So Chris Peel, top 100 prospect, top 100 cornerback out of Charlotte, Providence Day. And there's another Peel related question here from John Stacy. I know Peel has a top 4, but come on, it's either us or Georgia, correct? So let's dive into the visit and then his overall recruitment to knock out both questions at once. I think the visit went well. Michigan, rolled out the maize and blue carpet for him. They had him front row. He had the best seats in the house out of the recruiting section. Actually, when I got to the Big House, he was down on the field not going through warmups, but taking a closer look at warmups and some of the other recruits. Steve Klingscale took him to see how he was working with the defensive backs. Klingscale has done a phenomenal job in this recruitment. I think I mentioned it on the previous live show, but every time I talk to Chris about Michigan, all he wants to do is talk about Klink. That relationship is great. I think it was a phenomenal visit. I think Michigan did everything right, but I'm not comfortable putting in a pick yet. I still want to see how things kind of progress. The difference between Georgia and Michigan is Georgia's loaded up in the secondary. They have multiple commits there. Michigan has no commits, and they're pitching Peel on being the guy at corner this cycle, and it's definitely working. I think it's kind of a toss-up there. The Carolina schools are very interesting, though. I would not completely dismiss the Carolina schools. At the end of the day, I do think it's Michigan or Georgia. But North Carolina State really impressed him on his official visit before the Michigan OV weekend. I think they're still a sneaky dark horse here. And then South Carolina, with what they're doing with NIL and the way they're getting him in for that final official visit, and their staff is really good at recruiting. I mean, they not just to say, oh, they're throwing NIL. I mean, their staff has done a great job of recruiting as well. When I was on the road flying to all these different states in the off season, I feel like I saw South Carolina all the time. They were just everywhere. So I know they've made a big impact with Peel, and they get the final OV. So I am not dismissing the Carolina schools, especially considering proximity. But yes, right now I do think it's more so Michigan or Georgia. I think again, I think the visit was phenomenal. I think it was great. I think Michigan checked a lot of boxes for him and his family, but I still don't think he's 100% sold on one school yet. Georgia's been the leader for a long time. I know Michigan has made it an extremely tight race, but he still wants to take that last OV to South Carolina, ponder it a little bit, and make a decision at some point in October. Looking forward to catching up with Chris Peel here in the next 48 hours. So I'll have an update for y'all directly from him soon. Let's go ahead and go to Owen Pastel. Quick hitters. Does Marion Stewart have a timeline? Are we still fighting for Jaron Hamilton? Is Pleasant interested in Michigan? We have to push. And what is your eval on Tala? Okay, so let's go one by one, kind of answer them in a quick manner. So Marion Stewart, on 300 wide receiver out of Chicagoland in the 2024 recruiting class, was just on campus for an unofficial visit, set to return to campus already for the game against Michigan State. So I put in a pick for Michigan over the weekend for Stewart. I think the Wolverines have the early lead there. Obviously, he's making a couple of visits this season. He also visited for the barbecue at the Big House. He has several program connections. He's good friends with freshman Tyler Morris. He grew up in the same 7-on-7 program as JJ McCarthy, and now that JJ is the starting quarterback, I think that's opened Stewart's eyes a lot. He is a former high school teammate of Tyler McLaurin. So again, a lot of connections there. Obviously, Michigan recruiting well in Chicagoland. Bellamy has done a terrific job with him early on, as has area recruiter Sharon Moore. So I don't think Stewart has an exact timeline yet. It's still pretty early for him as a 2024. But like I said, I think Michigan has the lead right now. Is Michigan still fighting for Jaron Hamilton? So Hamilton, I think, was one of the biggest risers in the On3 rankings. I believe he vaulted into the On 300. Wide receiver out of Gainesville, Florida. Michigan is fighting for him. They are set to get an official visit next month. However, Alabama is the team to beat there. Now, if Alabama fills up and they just landed a commitment from Jyaire Hill, which is notable, 5-star wide receiver this cycle, I think the door could open up for Michigan to kind of sneak in there with Hamilton and land him. He's definitely an explosive prospect. He's a guy that wasn't talked about a ton. He visited Michigan in the offseason. Things kind of faded. He was more of a 3-star guy, but I mean, his stock has gone up significantly. And Michigan's right back in the picture there. So kudos to Ron Bellamy and area recruiter George Hilo for getting back in that race. Is Roderick Pleasant interested in Michigan? So Pleasant, an on 300 cornerback out of California. Brother played at USC, has been considered a USC lean for a long time, but has not committed to the Trojans, still kind of floating out there. Yeah, right now, the top guys on the corner board are Chris Peel and Jyaire Hill. No questions asked. Those are the two must-land guys for Michigan. But Roderick Pleasant is a speedster. He also runs in the 10-2s. He ran head-to-head with Nyckoles Harbor in a couple of track meets on the national stage this summer. So he brings plenty of speed. He's just a smaller kid that definitely needs to add some weight. He's on the shorter side, but obviously you can't teach that speed. Michigan did send him an official offer, and they are continuing to monitor. So we'll see if anything happens. If Michigan does push, I think they would be a factor. Another thing to note with Roderick Pleasant is he actually played club 7-on-7 with Michigan wide receiver commit Samaj Morgan. So there's a little connection there. What is your eval on Talia Tala? And I'm Not sure if I said that correctly, but consensus 4-star offensive lineman out of Utah. I haven't looked into him too much. He's out of all the newer offensive line targets, so Afobe, Chester, Lemieux, um, Fatig, I think Tala is the lowest on the board right now. If Michigan misses on some of these other guys, I think they could make a run there. But right now, Michigan keeping him warm, so I've been kind of keeping him warm in terms of making my own eval and doing a lot on him. So thanks, Owen, for all those great questions. Let's see. Hakeem 56. No blue chip running backs want to play with Michigan. What's up with the lack of buzz with high 4 and 5-star backs? Look at Hakeem's gonna bait me into another 15-page discussion, which is exactly what we had over at the Wolverine. If you haven't joined the Wolverine, now's a great time to remind you to sign up for $1 for an entire year. Come converse with your fellow Michigan fans. We had a lengthy discussion on running back recruiting last week, very passionate and heated debates. Look, I have been a critic of Mike Hart as a pure recruiter. I think Mike Hart is a terrific identifier of talent, has a track record of doing so. A guy that's been able to find lower rated backs at his previous stops and has been able to develop them. He's a great coach on the field. Michigan's running backs have taken a step up since he's arrived in Ann Arbor. So there are a lot of positives when it comes to Mike Hart. He also happens to be a Michigan legend. But I think Hart has focused in a lot on more diamond in the rough running backs, more guys that fit his mold as opposed to waiting it out and pushing for higher profile backs. He seemed content to take guys that fit the mold, and if they want to commit, he just takes their commitment early. You saw it last cycle with CJ Stokes. You saw it this cycle with Benjamin Hall and Cole Cabana. Now, I said Mike Hart is a very good evaluator, right? So, some of these guys are definitely going to hit. CJ Stokes looks like he could outplay his ranking. I became more of a CJ Stokes fan as the cycle went on last year, just like I've become more of a Cole Cabana fan this cycle. And Cabana has blown up in terms of his ranking, now ranked, I believe, in the top 175. Yep, there we go. Top 175. He's number 152 on three, all the way up to 112 on ESPN. And I believe I just saw 24/7 updated their rankings, and he's at 161, which is not reflecting here. But he's a top 200 player in 3 out of the 4 services, with rivals having him top 250. So he's again a guy that's kind of blown up from a rankings perspective, has really taken off as a senior. He's put out some tremendous senior tape. He's lighting up the state of Michigan in terms of all-purpose yards. Whenever you have a guy that runs a 10.55, there's always room for him. So I think Cabana can play the AJ Henning role with more time in the backfield. Obviously, AJ sees more time as a receiver than he does as a running back, but I think, you kind of flip that part of the role a little bit. And I think that's what you have in Cabana. He's just a dynamite weapon. So like I said, sometimes it definitely works out with Hart's eye for talent. Obviously, Cabana, a riser in the rankings, CJ Stokes playing well as a true freshman, but sometimes it might not. Michigan has another commitment from Benjamin Hall, 3-star running back out of Georgia, who's not having a very good senior season right now and isn't getting a lot of touches for his high school team. I think there's a higher hit rate with guys that are obviously ranked really high, but more so than the rankings, right? It's not even about the rankings. No college coach should look at the rankings and be like, all right, these are my top targets based on the rankings. No, I mean more so other college coaches sharing the same opinion, guys that are very highly touted, highly recruited. Those are guys that have a higher hit rate than more so diamonds in the rough. So I think you're taking a chance by not entering those highly contested recruitments. The 3 backs that Mike Hart has taken during his time at Michigan haven't been very highly contested recruitments. With CJ Stokes, the home state school, South Carolina, was thought to be a favorite early on, and they didn't really push as hard as Michigan. Michigan State was thought to be the primary competitor for Michigan with Cabana, but the Spartans had a change at the running backs coach position, and things kind of fell through there. And then Hall didn't have many P5 offers either that were committable. So he's kind of taking guys early that, again, not a lot of other major programs are really vying for. And when you're with Mitch, and that's fine, if you get guys and they produce, that's all that matters. But this is the University of Michigan. This is running backs. This is Mike Hart, man. Like, he's a legend, right? Like, he should be competing for the top guys nationally. He shouldn't settle early on. He should go after the big fish. Like, you have an amazing track record. You were an amazing player. Michigan is a very running back friendly school. It's Michigan. It offers everything you want. You just had Haskins taken in the NFL draft. You have Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum that are going to have really great years. Everything's there to sell to elite running backs. It's puzzling that, Hart's willing to just take guys early on and not go in for the long haul on these highly touted backs. Like, I mean, I get trusting your evaluations to an extent, but I think Michigan should be in the running for top 100 backs every cycle. Blake Corum was of that caliber. Donovan Edwards was of that caliber. There's no reason that Mike Hart shouldn't be landing guys that are really high 4 stars and approaching, 5-star territory. That's my opinion. You might disagree and say Hart should take the guys he feels comfortable taking because of his track record as an evaluator. But just looking at it from, the perspective of Hart's resume and what his name means and how Michigan utilizes its running backs and what Jim Harbaugh was even able to accomplish with running backs at the NFL level. I mean, everything's just an easy sell to top flight backs. I mean, everything is there that you would want if you're a highly touted running back. So, I'm not sure. It's definitely a touchy subject and one that's difficult to answer. And we've had this question up on the screen for a while. So Brian Myers asked, what is your take on Benjamin Hall's struggles this season? Will he end up in this class? Will Michigan go for another running back? That's another interesting question. Benjamin Hall, there's no way around it. Like, he's very well built, in his upper and lower half. He's a tank, man. He's 5'9.5", 227 pounds. He's a guy that I saw in the spring and thought, he could play that power back role for sure with how he's built. But he hasn't had much production this year. North Cobb, his high school team, has really gone in favor of another back, David Mbadinga, who has a couple of Power 5 offers. Mbadinga this past week had 29 carries. Hall had no carries. The week prior to that, I went out and saw Benjamin Hall live, and Mbadinga got the lion's share of carries while Hall had just 1 carry. This is a guy that is a great student in the classroom, was voted a team captain in the spring. So I don't suspect any off the field issues going on. It's just one where it looks like his high school coach is favoring the other back. They also have another change of pace back that has some bigger offers. So, it's a tough situation for Hall. It's a tough situation for Michigan. I do think Hart took Hall a little too early this cycle. He could have continued to push for a guy like Jaden Lemar, who I think could be a viable option, who's currently committed to Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame stinks on the field. There's an opportunity for Michigan to potentially make a move with Lemar. Michigan was very high on his list. He visited Ann Arbor on multiple occasions. So we'll see. It's always tough when you're asking, will schools drop guys and things like that. And, I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't happen, but I know Michigan holds itself to a high standard. So we'll see how that kind of situation shakes out. Let's go ahead and go to another question. Let's go to Sean Richardson, who brings a name up from the past. Do you know what happened with Antonio Gates Jr.? Is there a reason Michigan didn't pursue him? So Antonio Gates Jr. was, I believe, a high 3 or a low 4-star wide receiver out of Fordson, Dearborn Fordson in the great state of Michigan. So he was a 4-star on 2 services, a 3-star on 2 other services. I know a lot of people wanted Michigan to take Gates last cycle. When Steve Clinkscale came in, he actually evaluated Gates as a defensive back and had him on campus and worked him out. And I know Clink was a fan of his, but Michigan kind of always balked on him. They didn't love him as a wide receiver. They were concerned about his speed. And then on top of that, I think the final nail in the coffin that I heard, so we'll just address this quickly, I guess. The final nail in the coffin that I heard was that Gates came to Michigan for a workout in the summer. The workout didn't go well. Gates kind of lost his cool, and then things just kind of spiraled down from there, and Michigan never offered. So, sometimes, you don't take a local player just to take a local player. If he's not a good program fit, or if you don't think he's, talented enough, then you just don't go for it. So, that was basically the gist of what happened with Gates. Let's go ahead and go over to Stephen Cannon. He says, "Why does it seem that Michigan can't recruit high-starred linebackers?" That's been an interesting one. George Hilo, Michigan's linebackers coach, had a history of landing some highly contested recruitments at the linebacker position. He actually flipped Brandon Jennings, who was rated really high when he was at Maryland, from Michigan. So, that was interesting. But, since his time here, obviously they landed Jimmy Rolder last cycle. Rolder ascended into the top 100. I thought Deuce Spurlock was a quality land. I think he was one of the more underrated guys in that class. This cycle's been a little puzzling, man. You'd think linebacker would also be another easy um, position to recruit, given Michigan's history with linebackers and just the physical aura of the Big Ten. Junior Colson kind of lining it up early. So yeah, that one's been really interesting. I don't know why Michigan's struck out on a lot of top linebacker targets this cycle. Now they did have Raylan Wilson committed. Remember, George Hilo did win that battle early on. Losing him to Georgia was tough. It's definitely the biggest hit of the cycle so far. Michigan hasn't really been able to replace Wilson. They did land a commitment from on 300 linebacker Samaj Bridgman from Philadelphia Imhotep Charter. He's a big physical kid, 6'1", like 235 pounds. I mean, he's a tank. He's a thumper in the middle, but doesn't have that speed and explosiveness that you look at in a guy like a Junior Colson. But aside from that, not a lot of linebacker targets right now. They just offered Arion Carter out of Tennessee, who's blown up with offers from Alabama, LSU, Kentucky, and others. He is interested in Michigan. Michigan pushing to get an official visit, but a lot of competition there. Linebackers are just kind of barren for Michigan this cycle. They do want to add another to pair with Bridgman, but not a lot of options right now. Let's go ahead and go over to Chase Speckman. Are there any targets in particular Michigan is looking to flip? So, like I said, just for those that weren't in here earlier, Michigan is looking at a handful of those Notre Dame commits headlined by Jaden Osbury and Charles Jagusaw. I think those are definitely two to keep an eye on in terms of guys that are committed to Notre Dame. Michigan's still in contact with Jaylen Brown, 5-star wide receiver committed to LSU. They are looking to flip Nick Fattig, offensive line commit to Texas Tech. So there are a few others Michigan will look at, and maybe some recruits that reach out to Michigan based on what Michigan does on the field and what their respective schools do or not do on the field. I think much like last cycle, Michigan will be looking for some late flips and some late lands based on, teams struggling and coaching changes and what Michigan itself is accomplishing on the field. But those are some names right now. Let's go ahead and go over to Shadyville 03 again. He asks, how would Kenny Dillingham taking the ASU job affect the Dante Moore recruitment? I think it'd have a huge impact on the Dante Moore recruitment. I think I wouldn't be sure if he would land at Oregon, but even if that happens, I'm not so sure he would land at Michigan either, given that Michigan's all in for Jaden Davis. Michigan, I don't think will ever truly lose 100% contact with Dante Moore. So I think that's always going to be, a subject of conversation until, more science elsewhere. So, I wouldn't put it at a very high percentage at all, obviously, but I do think there's a world where Dante Moore ends up at Michigan. I suppose, it's the universe, lots of things can happen. But yeah, as of right now, I mean, just a lot of speculation. If Dillingham does take that ASU job, if that whole ordeal happens, then yeah, I think you could see Dante look around. But again, I can't make this any more clear. Michigan is fully focused on Jaden Davis. He is the guy. They obviously had him in for the game against Hawaii. I would expect him to be back on campus for one of the big games in October. He's visited Michigan a number of times, three out of the last 4 months, I believe. So he is the guy. He's also a guy that the staff has connected better with. Matt Weiss has done a better job with Jaden Davis than he did with Dante Moore in the relationship building category. Davis really values what Jim Harbaugh brings with his experience playing quarterback in the NFL and obviously having coached some good quarterbacks in the league as well. Looking at the job he did with a guy like Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick and developing their talents. So I think right now, everybody should just not forget about Dante, but just put Dante like Dante's like that thing you put in the freezer and then you're cleaning it out and you're like, oh man, look at that, I still have a popsicle left in there if it ever happens. But Jaden Davis should be the guy that you're fully focused on. He should be the guy, the first thing you're taking out of the freezer is some good ice cream. Like that's Jaden Davis. He needs to be the guy at the top of mind. You need to let Dante sit back there until something of significance happens. Let's go ahead and go down to John Blaze. He said, any stud defensive end leaning towards Michigan. So defensive line is another interesting one. Right now, I think they're done with edge guys. So if we're talking about edge guys, pretty much done there. They have a class with the highest upside nationally right now. When you look at Collins Anchiampong, he's only played football for a year. And Oeda, who's having a monster statistical senior season, he's only played football for 3 years. And Merrick Kumba, obviously an international prospect from France. So edge guys, those are the guys. That's likely going to be the class. I don't think they add another one unless someone really, tantalizing pops up. In terms of actual, defensive line recruits, like maybe 3 techs or what would be, considered, a tackle or an end, I guess, in Michigan's scheme. You already have Brooks Barr, who's 6'6", 275 pounds. That kind of fits more of that end role. I think right now the focus is a little more on getting the beefier guys. So Caden McDonald, obviously, at the very top of the board, 6'2", 325 pounds. So he kind of fits that mammoth nose role. They could look at some other 3 technique, end type of guys. I know they are evaluating some others, but again, not true like edge guys, right? More so 3 tech guys like, Riley Van Poppel, who's committed to Nebraska, who they liked early, is a guy they could circle back to, or Jamarion Harkless, who is committed to Illinois and has opened things up, is a guy they could circle back to. So not a lot of, stud guys right now for the 2023 class. I think 2024, we'll have some guys that Michigan could land that are of high caliber. But right now, I think the edge class is the edge class. And if we're talking about, 3 techs, it's more so guys that would be late risers. Let's go ahead and go down to some newer comments. Let's go ahead and go to account 22. He says, are we going to steal Notre Dame's 2023 linebacker recruits? And just so you don't think I ignored you, Theodore Frazier also asked about 2023 linebacker recruiting. So I addressed 2023 linebacker recruiting a little earlier. Not many targets aside from Arion Carter, who they just offered yesterday, but a lot of competition there for the late riser. But I do think Jaden Osbury is one to keep an eye on. Committed to Notre Dame, top 100 recruit. I actually believe he dropped a little bit in the rankings on 300 recruit, I suppose. Is a guy that Michigan loved early on. They got him on campus for an official visit. I think they finished second in that recruitment, but it wouldn't be surprising to see him visit in October for one of the big games. He has a close relationship with area recruiter Ron Bellamy. George Hilo did a nice job of recruiting him as well. Defensive coordinator Jesse Minter was very involved. So I know he really likes the staff. He visited as an underclassman along with his brother, who ended up at Auburn, but was high on the board for Michigan. But I think Bellamy's Louisiana ties are definitely an X factor. You saw it last cycle. He was able to flip Louisiana native Amorion Walker from Notre Dame. So I think he could potentially accomplish the same thing with Osbury. We'll see. Let's go ahead and go to Haven Harris. He says, I know that Jaden Davis is the big fish for quarterbacks, but is there any 2023 that is gaining buzz that should look at outside of Dante? Right now, Michigan's not really looking at any 2023 quarterbacks. I mean, again, the focus is really on Jaden Davis. If there's a guy to look at in 2023, the only one that really comes to mind is Brady Drogosh, who's committed to Cincinnati. He's a plus athlete. He's 6'5", so he's a tall quarterback with a big frame. He had the highest spark score out of all the quarterbacks at the Elite 11 regional in Ohio. I saw him play last year for De La Salle against Grosse Pointe South. He had a really good in-game against Will Johnson. He can definitely run. He's a guy that could even move to tight end, I guess, later on. But Drogosh is one to watch just because I think he's an intriguing athlete with a big frame and a big arm. He actually made it to the Elite 11 finals, and he's a local kid. But again, not much with 2023 quarterback recruiting. Prince Elia has a longer question. He says, why can't Michigan not recruit 5 stars consistently? I am happy with their scouting and development. Just curious why we're not competing with the big dogs. So you can make the easy answer and say NIL. Obviously, Michigan is not doing, I don't know, really know how to word pay for play. I mean, there's no other way to word it. Michigan's not going to be involved in that type of market competition. So I think that eliminates a lot of highly rated guys. Maybe not a lot, but a decent amount of highly rated guys. NIL is becoming more and more of a factor, and that's why it's made this cycle harder to cover than ever before. You look at it right now, Michigan is ranked 26th nationally and 4th in the Big Ten, which is low by Michigan standards for sure. I think right now Michigan's still navigating the NIL waters, but in this cycle in particular, I think you still have to remember, Michigan had a great season. They won the Big Ten. They beat Ohio State. They made it to the college football playoff. But at the same time, the offseason was chaotic. And at the root of things, recruiting is still a relationship game. And there was a lot of staff movement. You lost your offensive coordinator. You lost your defensive coordinator. You had guys, moving to different position groups. Jyaire Harbaugh from tight end to safety, Ron Bellamy from safety down to wide receivers. So you had a lot of staff shuffling. You had Jim Harbaugh flirting with the NFL. He wasn't his usual, getting on Zoom calls and doing all these things as he kind of dealt with the Minnesota Vikings. So there are just a lot of moving parts this offseason with the staff. So I think that hindered Michigan's ability to capitalize off the momentum they built last season and get some guys locked in early. So that, along with NIL, I think has affected Michigan this cycle. They are in a good spot with a lot of top level guys early on in 2024. So, if they have another big season, if they avoid a chaotic offseason, and if they figure out NIL to an extent, Michigan's not going to be Miami. They're not going to be Texas A&M. They're just not. But if they're able to figure it out to an extent, then I think you'll see them land some really highly touted prospects next cycle. Let's see. Theodore Frazier says, EJ, how far can Michigan rise in the 2023 rankings if they close with their higher recruits? Last cycle, Michigan had an amazing close. You look at the ranking right now, and they were able to vault all the way up to number 9. But, this cycle, looking at the numbers, looking at the class average, I think top 15 would probably be a safer bet. So we'll see kind of how that shakes out. T Hammer says chances we land Arion Carter. How hard is Michigan pursuing? So Arion Carter, new linebacker offer that just went out yesterday. I mentioned that over at the Wolverine, $1 1 year, that Michigan was going to take a harder look at defensive linemen and linebackers in 2023, looking for some late senior risers a la Jimmy Rolder last cycle. Arion Carter is one of those guys. He's completely exploded on the recruiting trail. He was a summer commitment to Memphis and now has racked up offers from Michigan, Alabama, LSU, Kentucky, and others. Michigan definitely pushing hard. They need another linebacker in the class. I watched a little bit of his film yesterday, some senior clips, and he's really explosive. He's fast. I think he's a little raw, but he definitely has the intangibles you're looking for. Look at Rivals ranking him as a 2-star. No, he's definitely has the look as a 4-star level prospect, and that's why he's generating those offers. So he's high on the board, but competing against the SEC schools is going to be tough. Obviously, Michigan's done well recruiting in Nashville. Steve Plingscale has a lot of ties there. They got Junior Colson out of there, and that's an easy sell to Carter. They also plucked Miles Pollard out of there, and he was a part of the same 7-on-7 organization as Carter. So that should help as well. Scroll ahead and go with rapid fire. We're basically at an hour now, guys. So I'm just going to roll through these next questions. Nick Wenzel says, any rumors of Jaylen Brown visiting anytime soon? So 5-star wide receiver committed to LSU. I mentioned early in the show, wouldn't be surprised if he does make it for a visit. Is Michigan recruiting any safeties this cycle? Michigan will only take a safety if it's a really, really special athlete, if it's a guy they think can be a difference maker. They are very content with the historic defensive back haul from last cycle. Another Dante Moore question from Oscar Ward, so you know that I'm not ignoring you. Is Michigan still pursuing Dante Moore? Very, very much on the back burner. The focus is Jaden Davis. Let's go down to Owen Postel. Is orange the worst flavor of popsicle? I don't really eat popsicles very often. I'm definitely an ice cream guy all the way. I'll take some froyo on occasion. I think the only popsicles that I really liked were those like Flintstone push pops from like the 90s off the ice cream truck. I mean, those were solid. So I guess orange is not the worst flavor. Hey, shout out to Brett Barrows who donated $2. Brett Barrows, super fan here. You can always go back and listen to these YouTube lives on our podcast feed the next day. So if you want to catch up, definitely do that. If you have a question, since you're I don't even know what the hell we call these super followers, then you can then I'll answer your question right away before we get out of here and give you in-depth detail. Right now we're just going through quick hitters. Prince Elia, if Jaden Davis is leaning Michigan, plus he wants to be an ambassador, what's taking him so long to decide for us or anyone? Yeah, Jaden Davis doesn't want to take the process too long. He does want to be a class leader. At the same time, recruiting is difficult. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I think he just wants to take some visits to other schools as well. Just make sure that Michigan checks more boxes than the other schools. But I don't think this one lasts, past spring of next year, potentially even past this calendar year. What about the Notre Dame commit who was in Ann Arbor this weekend, says Ben Sherman. Or last weekend, I guess he corrects himself. So over the weekend for the UConn game, Brandon Davis Swain was on campus. He's in 2024 top 100 defensive lineman. He's not really a guy that fits the scheme necessarily. He's, about 6'2", 245 pounds. So he's not a guy that's a true edge, or he's not really a 3-tech type, but I think he could be maybe in the same mold as Chris Jenkins. Michigan is re-evaluating him if they do make a push for Davis Swain, who's out of the Pipeline School West Bloomfield, right down the highway from Ann Arbor. Then I do think he is definitely a flip candidate. Is there any chance we use Andrew Pong in a Eric Armstead type of role? As you guys know, I'm a Niners fan, and I definitely do like that comparison. That's a good one, Owen. I think they would use him in that type of role. Um, but yeah, I mean, they love his upside. I'm interested to see how much weight Collins gains. He's already at 6'8", 254 pounds. Obviously, Armstead turned into a bigger guy and continued to add some weight. So I definitely think that that's a possibility. Um, Jasmine Gravely. Look, we've got female here. We love the ladies coming on as well. New to the chat, been watching, first time commenting. Glad you joined us. What 2024 recruits do you think Michigan has a big chance to get? Like I mentioned to Marion Stewart earlier in the show on 300 wide receiver, Michigan is in a great spot with him early on. They just had him on campus for a visit. They had him on campus for the barbecue at the Big House, and he's set to come back for the game against Michigan State. Jaden Davis, obviously, is a guy that we've talked about a ton. Top 100 quarterback. He is the priority in 2024. I think Michigan's in a great spot with his wide receivers. Shannon Goodwin is a Michigan legacy. And a guy that just visited with Davis on his previous visit for the Hawaii game. Jordan Shipp is the other wide receiver in 2024 at Providence Day. I think Michigan's in a great spot with him as well. So those are just a handful of guys. Let's see if there are any last questions. The last question we have is Shadyville3, who said, "Where are the Notre Dame Trolls now?" Nowhere, because they suck. Go Blue. Thanks, guys, for joining us on this show. As always, subscribe to the Wolverine.com, $1 for 1 year. Subscribe to our YouTube page completely for free.